I'm Justin Davis, and this is Joe Camp's RC.
Alright guys, here we are at the field. Let's go ahead and do a line of sight flight test with this little GEPRC Hummingbird, and then after that we'll do some FPV. I'm going to run this today on 3S, but you can also run it on 2S if you're brand new to the hobby. That's what I would probably recommend that you guys do. Start out on 2S and then move up to 3. Now I am also kind of excited to try this one because it has GEPRC's new flight controller. I haven't seen them make a flight controller before yet, but here it is, and it's pretty much an all-in-one deal too, so you can get these separate from this particular frame. You can add this on anything else. But after we do the flight test, we'll go into the studio and we'll talk about some of the pros and cons and make this a proper review for you guys. So let's go ahead and set it down. Let's do some line of sight real quick. So first time I've flown this, let's just see how it pitch bumps. Pitch bump is just a little throttle punch there. I see some LEDs on the back kind of changing colors. That's kind of cool. That's kind of neat that it does that. Let's test out the roll rate. Looks pretty good there. I have it set to about 70, not real super high. Go up to 80 if you want to, have it a little more squirrely. But it feels good. Feels like it might be a good flying quad. These are way different than probably even like a year ago, especially moving up to 1106 motors. Started out on 1102s on brushless micro, and from 1102s up to 1106 where we're at on a lot of these 3S brushless micros, this is a huge difference. And we just have way better props right now than we did even 6 months ago. Gym fan Hulkies are pretty much a crowd favorite. So everything looks good here. Let's do one quick punch out. Not bad. Not bad. Got small, quick. Let's go ahead and bring it back and land it on the landing pad. Let's do some FPV with this little Hummingbird. See what it's all about. Here we go.
Top dog, bite them all, yeah, I'm burning it up. DPGC, you should be turning it up. CBT, LBC, yeah, we hooking back up. And when they bang us in the club, baby, you got to get up. Cuz homies, thug homies, yeah, they giving it up. Low life, yo life, boy, we living it up. Taking chances while we dancing in the party for show. Slip my girl a 44 when she crept in the back door. Chickens looking at me strange, but you know I don't care. Step up in the smother, just a swank in my hair. Trick, quit talking, crip walk if you down with the set. Take a bullet with some grip and take the smoke on this head. Out of town, put it down for the father of rap. And if you happen to get cracked, trick, shut your trap. Come back, get back, that's the part of success. If you believe in the S, you be relieving your stress. Da 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 da, it's the one and only Eagle Double G. Snoop Dogg. Da 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 da, you know I'm mobbing with the D.O.E. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Da 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 da, it's the one and only Eagle Double G. Eagle Double G.
Hold up.
Yeah.
Swirl.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Hold up. Hey, for my people thinking we soft, we don't play. We gon' rock until the wheels fall off. Hold up. Wait, for my nigga be acting too bold. Take a seat. Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.
Alright guys, welcome back from that flight test. Let's go ahead and jump into this review and let me give you the pros and cons of the new GEPRC Hummingbird. I don't know why they call it the Hummingbird, because it actually does fly super smooth, like maybe a Hummingbird does, but Also on 3S, you can rip it a new one. So that's kind of what I look for with 1106 power system setups. And the new flight controller that they released called Stable is an F4 flight controller with a 4-in-1 BL Heli ESC 12 amp or 20 amp version. It's also supporting D-Shot 600, and it already has a 48 channel 5.8 video transmitter in this stack. So everything inside the stack that you need, you can also buy this as a separate entity right here. So all in one box, and you can build a brushless micro probably in under an hour, which is kind of crazy. Now the nice thing about this Hummingbird, in my opinion, is that it came from the factory already pre-tuned. And when I flew this for the first time for this demo today, I was impressed because there wasn't a lot of vibrations. Now, a lot of that has to do with the flight controller, the power system, and the props that are on board. So I'm running the GEMFan Hulkies, and they're kind of a crowd favorite. They give you 2 sets of these along with this quad, so I think that is a huge bonus for this quad. It did not come with an extra battery, which was kind of a bummer that some of these plug-and-flies and bind-and-flies lately don't come with an extra battery. I think for the price point, I would kind of be expecting that I would get at least maybe 1 battery along with it. But what I see on here as far as the specs go are really good. So I can run this 3 to 4S, no problem there. And a lot of these brushless micros lately have been coming with 1106 motors on here. And I have 6,000 kV 1106 motors, and they look like they're actually branded with the GEPRC logo on one side and SpeedX on the other. And the F4 flight controller under here, just underneath where the ESCs are, there's 2 levels of dampening in here, in between the bottom of the frame of the quad, where all this motor vibration is going to come straight to this flight controller and affect the F4. They thought about that, and so I feel like they flew this one and they probably tuned it before they sent it out to reviewers and other people that are flying this, which is nice because they know that if you slap together a bunch of parts, that doesn't really necessarily mean it's going to fly good. You have to make sure that the PIDs are tuned correctly to that particular quad weight and power weight ratio, and also the props that you have on the quad. It makes a huge difference to have a nice tune on it right out of the factory. So with that said, I think they did pre-tune this one before they sent it out to us, which is super awesome. Now also, I have to say the 48 channel 5.8 VTX one here, this is a really nice VTX. I was using my Sky O2 goggles with Diversity, and I didn't have any problem with sort of any interference or any kind of signal interruptions when I was flying around stuff. It seemed to be a pretty solid video transmitter, and it is switchable between 25, 100, 200 milliwatt up to 48 channels and race band. So it's also nice that they made a hole in the very top of this frame. You can see just inside here where the antenna connects. If this snapped off, you could always put another one on there, and it's easy to pop this top off because they're following the less screws on top trend, which is usually 4 screws, but they actually reduced this one to 3, which I think is super great. Remove those 3 screws and you can access your entire stack if you have to do any changes. Now, looking at the frame also from the side, you'll notice that it is actually pretty low profile compared to some of the other brushless micros that have come in on the channel recently. This one is a little lower from top to bottom, mainly because they put the receiver back here on the back, right behind where this LED brake is. And this is kind of neat because the LED changes colors when you're flying it. That's kind of cool. But moving the receiver on the back definitely brings it down a bit, at least a few millimeters, and it makes it look kind of cool and have that sort of low profile look. Now in the front of this frame, I'm not a huge fan of this camera mount and surround that they have here. It's nice that it's mounted from the sides like this, but I'm already missing 1 screw on this side, so that's not super cool that one of the screws fell out during my flight test. That means that someone in the factory didn't tighten it up all the way, and I failed to check it before my flight test. Now, one other thing about this camera mount up front, it looks great from the top right here. I have plenty of protection side to side, and from the front it looks like we have a little bit of room, a couple millimeters in between the camera and the front of the quad for those frontal impacts. But where this frame fails to meet our standards is on the bottom, and I've talked about this before. There was a Diatone R90 that I broke a couple run cams on, mainly because this bottom PCB right here is kind of hanging out. You can actually see it sticking out past the carbon frame right there. So also really bad on this side because this whole part of the camera is hanging out and exposed past the frame. So if you hit anything hard like a tree branch or something, in a crash. If you're trying to do a cool gap or something, once you break this frame on the camera, you're going to have to buy a new mount for that. But you can get these new camera mounts on runcam.com. But otherwise, I think this is probably not the greatest design. It looks cool right here, how they shaved this part off. But if they actually brought it all the way around, or even brought it out just a little further and then brought it around like that, they could have protected this whole bottom part. And the bottom of the frame could actually came forward just a little further to protect it along the bottom of that PCB, in my opinion. But if you're just getting into the hobby and you're looking for something that's going to be a really nice high definition camera with great color pop and great shadow variations and contrast in color, these Runcam Micros are super awesome. A lot of people like these. They're not the highest resolution. They're 600 TVL, which is kind of standard, and it has that standard 2.1 millimeter lens on there. And also in the back of the frame, I'm going to be a little bit critical here. They did have the antennas from my receiver coming out the back of this sort of LED brake system cover plate they have back here. There's two holes right here that it was coming out of, and I didn't see that I had any of the standoffs that come out of that. So I do have the top parts, but I didn't have the two tubes that are supposed to go along with it. So what I did was I just brought them out the top of these two holes right here. This is maybe the way I would do it. You do have a little more antenna exposed right here and here, but I usually don't have a problem with these ripping off right here. I like to bring mine up on top of zip ties and just a little bit of heat shrink over top of it to keep those down to the zip tie. Usually it's just a little bit better system for me, and if I break them I can always replace them because these are super cheap. And they also give you that sort of plastic stuff that everybody's putting on the bottom of the quads right now, and I really don't like this stuff at all, because when you hit the ground, if you have any force on your battery at all, it's not sticking to the quad very good with this stuff. It actually will help the battery fly off because it's not really sticking down. So what I generally do is use a piece of Velcro on the bottom, and I always use Velcro on the bottom of my batteries. I usually put the hard part on the quad itself and then the sort of fluffy part on the battery. This works really good for me, and I usually rarely ever have any batteries eject off the quad. And speaking of batteries ejecting off the quad, they do give you two battery straps, and I'm not really a huge fan of this style battery strap. I do like to use the ones that have a buckle on them, but these will work until you can get some nicer straps. I would like to see maybe a little better strap included with this, so maybe even with a little metal clip. I've seen some that are almost indestructible with the metal clips on the side for ratcheting down it around the battery, which is kind of sweet. Now I was also, like I said before, I'm pretty stoked that it came with the two sets of Gemfan Hokies. I think that's a pretty good value for this kit, but I didn't think it was the biggest value that there was no battery along with it. So if you're going to buy a battery for this particular quad, I would highly suggest the Tattoo 3S 75C batteries. These are awesome. They already come with an XT30 connector on here. So and in the box, this quad actually came with a JST on there, a little red connector, and that's a pretty good one for running 2, possibly 3S, but I really wouldn't run 4S on a JST. So if you plan to run it on 3 and 4S, go ahead and use the little connector that they give you in the box and solder that on there, and you won't have any problem with voltage, and it'll actually get a little better performance out of these motors if you move it up to an XT30. Most of the brushless micros have that right now on them. And the other battery I'm going to suggest is that GNB 450 3S battery, and these are 80C to 160C burst. So these are really, really good right now. And the cool thing about the GNBs is if you have two different types of quads, you have a JST connector here or you have an XT30. So I can switch between whether I want to use this battery on different types of quads, which is also really a nice option. Now the motors on here, they're pretty nice. The 1106s are really nice, 6,000 kV, and the SpeedX logos on one side and the GEPRC logos there. But I gotta pick on these guys for a minute, mainly for the hardware that they included with it. These types of screws, for some reason, I don't know if they're not quite long enough to go all the way through here, but I found that when I turned them just an extra little turn after they were tight, sometimes they would slip off inside the threads and back out. So that's not super good. Like one would tighten up and then the next one over might actually sort of crank past the thread point and pop back out. So that is not super cool. I also noticed that in some of the photos that they have on the internet, I noticed that they did use different bolts on theirs than what I got in my box. So that might be something to think about. If you want to use the Emax Baby Hawk hardware, they have some really nice silver hardware that's different color than this, then those actually work really, really well for holding on this size of prop onto 1106 motors. So let's go ahead and put it on the scale. Let's give it a weigh in real quick. We'll give it a dry weight, then we'll weigh it with that Tattoo battery, and I have 89.2 grams there on the scale. And I'll just go ahead and put that Tattoo 3S 450 on there, and I have 130.9 grams total takeoff weight. So that's pretty light considering it has a 3S battery on there. So I think really overall for their first release for a plug and fly or a bind and fly quad, this is not too bad, mainly because unlike some of the other quads that I've flown recently that had issues or actually had terrible vibrations right out of the box and you needed to PID tune it, I feel like this quad is pretty good for being able to fly good on 3S right out of the box and fly as smooth as it did. If you look back at some of that footage from the flight test, you don't see a whole lot of wobble, and it actually does hold a straight line really well. Now for my flight test, I probably could have upped the rates maybe to 75 or 0.80. If you really want this thing to spin fast, go ahead and put it on 0.80, and that's just going to fly a lot snappier for you. Probably if you're looking to freestyle, that would be the way I'd do it. Now 7.0 just seemed like not enough. But overall, it's a great quad. I think it's worth the money. I feel like the carbon could be a little more polished. Maybe if they did a little bit of beveled edges or added a little more high gloss, maybe a little more sanding around the edges of the carbon fiber itself, it would be a little nicer looking. The GEPRC logo embossed on top is kind of nice, but the overall package, I'm going to have to say flight characteristics 4.5. Frame maybe like a 4.0 or 3.5. Not the greatest frame in the world, but it looks cool, so maybe a 4.0. I'm going to be a little bit lenient there, and they do have some of the tabs soldered on the outside, which I'd like to see those maybe tucked underneath to make it just a little bit neater in there. So some small and minor details, and maybe they'll fix a few of these things on the next revision of this one, but I think they have a good idea started here, and it really does fly actually really, really well, especially since they included the Gem Fan Hokies. So we have a really nice flying quadcopter here from GEPRC. So I gotta say thumbs up to GEPRC for a pretty decent product, and one of the first brushless micro releases that they've had, and I can stand behind it. It has all the good stuff here that I'm looking for, like Betaflight OSD and a great power system on 1106s and up to 20 amp ESCs, no problem there for 3 and 4S fun flying. So I think you would have a good time with this one and have a lot of fun with it out in pretty much any field. You can fly some big field stuff with this, or you can fly at proximity in some smaller areas, because it really is a small quad. And also, I think it's pretty cool that they released the stable flight controller setup for this as well. It has all the information and QR codes on the side, and this is what this looks like in the box. You have everything here, your VTX, your ESCs, and your flight controller there, and a little extra cables and stuff in the bottom of the box. So they have a good thing going here, and it comes with a video capacitor, so we can solder that on and get a really nice clean signal. And I didn't see that this capacitor was on this quad, so that might be an addition I'd like to make to this one a little bit later. But you know what, the video looks great on that, so I'm not even sure you really need the capacitor. But GEPRC is up to some cool stuff here, so you can check them out and see what you think. Check out some of the other reviews and see what some of the other guys said, and compare it to my notes on this one. Anyway guys, I'm Justin Davis, and this has been the GEPRC Hummingbird. So I'm pretty excited to see that GEPRC is getting into the brushless micro game. Take care guys, and I'll see you on the next one.